And we are back, and we're so glad that you have tuned in to this edition of Inside Career Technical Education. I'm Ann Baldwin, one of the hosts of this podcast.
And I'm Jim Bologa, President and CEO of YTI Career Institute.
And we're so excited. We talk about so many different topics on these podcasts, but one that always makes me excited to get into is the success of the YTI Career Institute graduates. And we've got a perfect example of that with us today in Matt Erno. Matt is the engineering manager at Dorman Products. And we're just so excited to have you here and to kind of share your story. And if we could kind of start with, why did you decide to attend YTI and when?
Absolutely. And thanks for having me, too. This is a great opportunity, I think, for people to listen and for me to tell all the positives I found from YTI. I went into the field because, honestly, I was lost in high school, didn't find a lot of value in the general classes, straight C student, as it were. And once it got to be crunch time, I really wanted to get into a career that was growing, and technology was always very exciting. I always found myself tearing apart, the cable box, the remote control, my gaming systems, and trying to put them back together. And I really wanted to know how they worked. So that drove me into getting into technology and specifically YTI.
And Matt, maybe you could talk a little bit about. That's great to, the lead up in terms of your thinking in high school. Maybe talk a little bit about, what program you took at YTI, and then maybe talk a little bit about your progression through the program and your employment, sort of your career, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. So once I got, the bug into getting into technology, YTI has this great electronics engineering technology program. EET there, and it started right away in the summer, so I felt like I got a jump start on my career, as opposed to more traditional, like 2 or 4 year schools. So getting right into it, I noticed an immediate shift in my attitude towards education because I could directly see the things I was learning correlate to something in the real world. I could hold it in my hand. Look, there's some resistors. I'm learning about what's the resistance, what's Ohm's law, and look, I can look at these all the electronics in my room, and now I know how, at least at some level, how they work. So I went from, like I said, a C student in high school to getting A's and really applying myself at YTI.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's great to hear your passion in your voice about how you were excited about the EET program. And so why don't we talk a little bit about just your career and maybe you could sort of talk about where you're at right now, and if you want to take a few minutes and talk a little bit about your career progression, we'd love to hear that, and talk a little bit about the company that you're currently working for and what you're doing.
I especially want to hear about the experience that you had with Flight Systems Electronics Group. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So after I graduated from YTI, I started working at Flight Systems Electronics Group in Lewisberry. It's not so far from York, and it was a great entry there into electronics and electrical repair. Flight Systems got me excited because I thought it would be all about aviation, but that was just a misnomer for the company. They started in electronics, working with NASA and avionics, but by that time, in the early 2000s, they were strictly automotive, which is still exciting. Engine controllers, the brain of cars. What we would do there is we would collect what's called a core, all these cars that go to junkyards or need repaired at dealers. If that computer goes bad, they send it to, core collectors, and those collectors will send the parts to, like, a Flight Systems. Mm-hmm. My job there at the time was to take these failed electronic modules and troubleshoot them, repair them, run through a simulation test set, and compare those failure modes to a schematic, and really down to the component, replace the component, and get out a certain amount of units every day. I found it very fulfilling to kind of have my own desk, my own domain, and become an expert in specific modules.
And you've also had a number of titles. You think about
Absolutely.
it from your graduation from YTI Career Institute. I'm assuming you went right into the job market. How hard was it, or easy was it for you to find employment?
That's one of the things that I think YTI has a leg up on others in the area, and just in general. Their career services department has always been very good to work with. That last term at YTI is known as an externship, where you get to try out a job for 3 months. I actually didn't end up staying at my externship because it just wasn't for me. It was in cabling and home installation for whole house audio and security stuff. Interesting stuff. It wasn't for me. As soon as I graduated, I got into flight systems, and YTI was a huge part of both finding that externship and finding this job. Throughout my progression at Flight Systems and now Dorman, I've actually maintained that relationship with YTI and encouraged our HR department, and the career services has been very reciprocating in that relationship. So whenever we have openings for technicians or internships, they've been just great to work with. So that's how that was. It was relatively easy for me to find a job, and then again find another job that I wanted to do.
Well, Jim, I just mentioned his titles. You didn't get there, and maybe it's because you're just, too vain. But you've had titles of lead technician, projects engineer, and your most recent title is engineering manager. Pretty impressive, Jim.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Matt. I mean, I think it's very impressive, and I would say that I commend you for going out on an externship and recognizing
Yes.
that part of your learning was not only what you like, but maybe what you're not as passionate about, and so I think so often I think folks, when they go through the learning process, everyone expects it to be just, absolutely perfect per se. But, part of learning is experiencing things that, that you may not really be passionate about. And it's great that you're able to identify that early in your, in your career. And, and I would simply say that it's interesting, in my 13 years in proprietary education, leading the schools, it's interesting to me how, like, the automotive industry, has gone from, call it maybe 35% of electronics in automobiles to now it's, 85, 90%. And, we're on the verge of, automated driving, cars and electric cars. I mean, it's just amazing the amount of technology and advancement and innovation that's occurred, in and around some of the things that, Matt's been able to live through.
We're speaking with Matt Erno. He's the engineering manager at Dorman Products. And we should also mention that Dorman is a global transportation solutions leader. It's really amazing that Dorman has a staff of 283 folks full-time, and 25 of those are repair technicians. So it's really, really interesting as you lead, 6 engineers with so many different responsibilities. This is such an emerging field and such a profitable field for folks getting into. I would assume that's your recommendation.
Absolutely. You can't put enough emphasis on finding something you're passionate about, but if you enjoy troubleshooting electronics, and even people on the more mechanical side, there's always a desire and a need for technicians and engineers in that field. So that's definitely my recommendation.
And Matt, what would you give, for a prospective, maybe high school student, like yourself now today, thinking about their decision? It's the 2021 graduates are coming out here, and in a few months, and what advice would you give to them, regarding their futures in terms of what you went through?
I'd say do your research. A tremendous amount can be sought out on the internet these days. Finding companies that are not only looking for people, but companies are doing a better job now more than ever of saying, hey, we're going to be looking into this technology in 2 years. You guys should look into that. And again, YTI does a great job of asking companies in the general area and encouraging them to communicate with them. So
yeah, absolutely.
Do some research.
Yeah, no, it's a very important point. I mean, we have program advisory committees, and again, one of the things that we do is we have folks in the community who are in the industries, and they help us define and refine our curriculum and what's appropriate, in today's world. And if and in terms, Matt, in terms of if you're an existing EET student at YTI Career Institute, what advice would you give to them as a future employee, say for Dorman Products? I mean, what would be 3 qualities that or characteristics that you would suggest to them that they think about or focus on?
3 good qualities would be, professionalism is always appreciated. We all like to have a good time at work, but professionalism goes a long way. Being thorough, go to an interview with some questions about the company. They may be answered in the interview or on the tour, but it always shows drive and hunger if you can answer some questions. And then, relax, be yourself in the same time, because an interview and just where you work, it becomes so much of your life. If you truly aren't happy or you truly don't want to work somewhere, it does nobody any good to put on a false face.
Absolutely.
Great advice.
It is great advice. Well, Matt Erno, engineering manager at Dorman Products, thank you for the relationship that you have with YTI Career Institute and the occupations and employment that you offer graduates. It really is encouraging for folks that might be considering getting into to this career.
On my side, I greatly appreciate the relationship I've been able to keep with YTI, and they make it very easy to continue to foster the culture of just growth, both in the industry and in education. So I appreciate being able to do this with you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks again. And we want to encourage people who are listening to this podcast for information on this program or any programs that YTI offers to go to the great website at yti.edu. And on behalf of Jim Bologa and myself, Ann Baldwin, we want to thank you for tuning in to this edition of Inside Career Technical Education.